As a Jewish woman, it's not that I'm not into uncircumcised penises, it's just a lack of exposure. Welcome back to And God Was Like. I'm your host, Ariel Kaplan. This week, I'm breaking down Parashat Lech Lecha featuring Daddy Abram. Chapter 12. And God was like, hey, Abram, I want you to uproot yourself from your land. If you do, I will bless everyone who blesses you, and I will fuck those who fuck with you. That came out wrong. Abram, his wife Sarai, and Abram's nephew Lot leave for Canaan. And when they get there, Abram builds a couple altars, and then they wind up in Egypt because there was a huge famine. Back in ancient Egypt, it was a sin to kill a man. Duh. But it was an even bigger sin to sleep with a man's wife. Now this causes an issue for Abram because Sarai was a fucking dime piece, okay? She was hot. And so Sarai and Abram decide to pose as siblings to protect Abram. Almost immediately, Sarai is taken to Beit Paro, Pharaoh's palace, because Pharaoh wants to bone Sarai. Not only that, he wanted to marry this bitch. As a sort of dowry, Pharaoh gives Abram cattle and slaves and money and stuff. But God, who's now looking out for his BFF Abram, is like, no fucking way. And he plagues Pharaoh. Pharaoh realizes what happened and he's like, Abram, if I knew she was your wife and not your sister, I wouldn't have married her, okay? I would have just fucked her. Pharaoh kicks the trio out. Abram, Sarai, and Lot go back to Canaan. Chapter 13. Between Avram's cuckold money from Pharaoh and Lot's own possessions, there just wasn't enough room for everyone. Lot settles in a city near the wicked town of Sodom. Abram gets to stay in Canaan. And God was like, look, Abram, everything the light touches is our kingdom. And babe, I'm gonna be the best damn pimp you ever did have. You're gonna have as many children as there are grains of sand. Chapter 14. A huge war breaks out amongst the kings, and they capture the people from the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, including Lot. Abram, who's like the best uncle ever, saves Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. Chapter 15. Abram is still not convinced of this whole covenant thing, so he's like begging God for a sign, and instead God knocks him out and enters his dream. So you're not actually gonna get the land. This promise is for your descendants. Unfortunately, they're gonna be slaves in Egypt for like 400 years. God will then bring Avram's kids to Canaan. Chapter 16. At this point, Sarai is getting super old. She doesn't have any kids, but what she does have is Hagar, her Egyptian maidservant. After 10 years of living in Canaan, Sarai's like, look, Abram, I'm clearly barren. Why don't you just impregnate Hagar and that'll be our kid? So Hagar, the concubine, gets pregnant and then she gets really pompous and conceited. Sarai goes off on Hagar. Hagar, who's pregnant, by the way, runs away. Now an angel of God finds Hagar in the desert and he's like, hey, fancy seeing you here. Hagar explains her situation with Sarai. The angel tells Hagar to go home. In exchange, he'll bless her with a son, and his name will be Ishmael. Chapter 17. So now Abram is 98. God appears to him. I am El Shaddai, God Almighty. Do as I say, because I'm paying you by the hour. Abram completely collapses on the floor because he is in the presence of the Shekhinah. Because Abram was not circumcised, the Shekhinah was too powerful for him. He's weak for the Shekhinah. And God was like, so I have some good news and bad news. The good news is you'll father nations with kings and stuff. And then he slips him a Viagra before delivering the bad news. To make the covenant official, you're gonna have to get rid of that turtleneck on your dick. God was more of like a scoop neck kind of God. When Abram is 99, he circumcises himself. Truly a simp for God. Abram circumcises everybody in town, including his 13-year-old son, Ishmael. And this is what is known as the Brit Milah. When a baby boy is 8 days old, he gets a little And then God was like, Abram, you're gonna be called Abraham because you're gonna father so many nations. And Sarai is now gonna be called Sarah because I'm gonna bless her with a baby boy. He also blessed her with big old titties, but I'll get into that next week. Avram almost pisses himself. He's like, bro, I'm like 100, Sarai's 90 or something. How the fuck is her old sack of bones gonna carry a baby? Your son will be called Yitzchak because you laughed. Your covenant and lineage start with him. Poor Ishmael, he's gonna be like an ugly stepsister. Shabbat shalom, thank you so much for watching and tune in next week. I'll tell you about Sarah's boob job.